Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so I haven't spoken to anybody in about, what, 2 days on here? Yeah, it's been about almost 2 or 3 days before I even made any content whatsoever, which is something that's very rare, but it's summertime, so it's a lot of stuff going on that doesn't have anything to do with sports or, camera stuff. So I've just been enjoying life away from some of my favorite subjects, but still focused on the things that I need to do to give y'all content. So, for example, been doing a lot of homework on the draft, been talking a lot about it. I gave that a little bit of a break over the last day or so to focus on fantasy football, even though it's extremely early. I would not advise anybody draft this early. But since I have time to draft and I know I got a lot of stuff ahead, I figured, hey, let me just spend a weekend drafting super early. These are money drafts, so I don't care what happens with that. So that's what I've been doing, man. Just drafting teams, man, left and right, and doing a little homework here and there on basketball stuff. I have a video coming probably within the next 24 hours in regards to the finals. I'll give you my prediction on that. I haven't really been focusing on a lot of talking heads about that because my interests have been in other areas. So time is just getting away from me, more or less. I've been focused on everything but some of the stuff that I want to talk about. So, for example, this video particularly, we talk about Tibbs and him being let go of the New York Knicks head coaching position today. Tibbs being fired was not a surprise to me necessarily. Not as much a surprise as the Knicks getting to the 6th game of the Eastern Conference Final. Put it like that. I definitely expected Tibbs to be let go, but I didn't think that with the success that they had, it would be very popular that they fired him. But then again, this is one of those situations where I just got to listen to Stephen A. Smith's take on this, and he said it felt like a scapegoating situation where the Knicks could have, kept Tibbs and answered questions, and Leon Rose could have been a guy taking some of the heat for what's going on with the roster, but because he felt that Tibbs was one of the reasons why the roster overachieved. But I don't know that any of that is really the way I see it, because the New York Knicks, first of all, had to get a lot of help from injuries to even put themselves in the position they were in before getting ousted in 6 games against the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Final. Cleveland had to go down with injuries, which they did, and a lot of people don't want to give them, what would come with Jason Tatum's injury, because they were already in command of the series when Jason went down. But I don't know if that series ends the way they wanted to if Jason continues to play. So it's a lot of stuff that had to go a certain way in order for the Knicks to even get as far as they did. So I would tell Knicks fans, your team not only overachieved, but also lucked into some of what happened there. And I think one of the reasons why you were as good as you were, aside from injury issues, was because of the roster being as talented as it is. I agreed with some of the moves that they made to put the roster together, but ultimately my criticism initially, after they completed their journey in putting this thing together, was that I thought that it lacked imagination. They overpaid for certain things, and what I meant by lack of imagination was they poured most of their money into the top half of the roster and didn't leave themselves a whole lot of money for the bench. And in hindsight, as I look back on it, it was clear as day, but I didn't see it the right way, was they did that because they had Tibbs as a coach and knew he wouldn't want to play most of the bench regardless how much they invested in it. So they made more sense for them to invest in the top 7 with all of the money and then just leave the rest being whatever, knowing that he wouldn't use the team. So my criticism of them building this team was they spent too much on OG Anunoby's contract. Now, OG Anunoby actually turned out to be one of the better players for the Knicks. I'm sure they were happy to have him, more so than maybe some of the other players that they spent a lot on. So in looking at that, maybe he's not the problem as it pertains to how much they spent on what. I'm not a fan of his acquisition, but I will admit that he was probably one of the most important players for the Knicks in these playoffs. He's not the guy I would remove at this point. But the trade for Karl-Anthony Towns, I didn't hate that trade. I thought that was a pretty solid trade, even trade. Both teams benefited. Both teams got to the conference finals. I don't hate that trade. I think the trade that you don't make Hindsight being 2020 is the Mikal Bridges trade that gives up 5 picks. Now I thought that was an overpay, but I didn't kill it because I viewed Mikal Bridges in a way that was much more elevated than I do right now. He struggled in these playoffs, and always take into account that he never misses any basketball games. So the price tag is going to have that on it. You're dealing with the crosstown Brooklyn Nets. There's a fee on that, unspoken truth. You're not going to just take a player away from Brooklyn, send it to New York without paying a fee for that. So I felt that was going to cost. And then just what he was doing for the Brooklyn Nets. He had a game where he went for 50. You know, he was playing like a star. They were putting the ball in his hands. So at the time, the price tag was elevated for his status then. It never took into account what ultimately he would be now. So his value has drawn down dramatically since leaving the Nets, and I respect that. All of that considered, that trade was still an overpay, even with all of that in consideration, in my opinion. 5 picks for him was too much, to say the least. Maybe more so when we say it now, but still, that should not have been done. And if they try to trade Mikal Bridges, they won't get half of that for him, unfortunately, at this point. So yeah, hindsight being 2020, that's probably the one I would bash that more so now, looking back on it, than maybe even OG Anunoby trade. But my thing with OG Anunoby is not only did they trade away 3 picks to get him, but they also paid him more than I would have paid him, given the fact that he had the injury issues that he did with Toronto. I just didn't feel like he was the best investment for the Knicks, and I felt like on top of what had already been done with the trade for Mikal Bridges, that was them giving up too much toward a few players, and of course leaving their team without a bench and all of that. So for me, I never really bought into the New York Knicks having enough to begin with. I was in a mindset when they put all this together, when everybody was, applauding them for putting this thing together, that I felt like they should have done one less thing, which was the OG Anunoby thing. I was fine with the Mikal Bridges thing. Fine, you gave up 1 million picks to get him from Brooklyn. He was playing like an all-star at the time. He never missed any basketball games. He's likely going to be able to defend the greatest guys no matter what, and all different types of stuff, and never get tired. This is the perfect player for them. I understand. It gives them the Villanova look. All of that looked like it was just going to line up pretty nicely. And they still, even in doing that, at the time, still had the picks that they were about to give up for OG Anunoby. I felt like they were still pick-rich for the most part, still within a reasonable place with their picks. You go from being pick-wealthy with 8 picks to spare, and you trade all 8 of them for like 2 players. And so my thing was, this lacks a significant amount of imagination. All of the different things that you could do with that much equity, and this is what they did. I just felt like it was lacking a great deal of imagination. Okay, and I said because they did that, they weren't going to have enough. And we fast forward to where we are right now. They've overachieved from what it is I expected. They never had enough. The Knicks never had enough. Even after doing the Karl Anthony Towns trade, which was done after all of that, I still felt like, okay, that could probably send them into a space that's really good. I like this better than I like Julius Randle at the time. Dante DiVincenzo was a nice role player, but, getting Karl Anthony Towns I felt was a good thing for their situation. Sends them over the top to where they have so much talent. Now you feel like they can contend. So I thought that was like, that kind of helped how I was viewing their roster. But now that I look back on it, I'd say they were never better than Boston. They were never better than Cleveland. And now as we approach where we're at right now, we can clearly see that they weren't better than Indiana. That wasn't as clear to me throughout the regular season. I thought Indiana and them were pretty much on par. Clearly Indiana's a better team, and it's because they're deeper. I think we've all been proving that at this point. So I said all of that to say the reason why they constructed that team the way they did was because they had Tibbs as their coach. And if you're going to go forward with Tibbs, you got to continue to keep that mindset. I don't think the New York Knicks front office wants to be strangled to having all of their cap money poured into the top half of their roster and ignoring the back half of their roster. It doesn't make any sense from a number of standpoints as we've illustrated on this channel a million times in a million different other scenarios. It makes so much more sense to use your bench so that you can keep your starters healthy. And if you have to go to your bench, if your starters get hurt, you will have them more seasoned and ready to go because they would have gotten the playing time that they should have gotten all season long. Not to mention that you lessen the chances of your starters getting hurt because you're giving them more of a breather and more of an opportunity to recover. So it's a lot of things that go into why it never makes any sense from a team standpoint to build the way the Knicks did. But they only built that way because they had the mainstay coach in place who was never going to play the bench. So it's like if you're gonna start making some damn sense of yourself, you got to remove the coach who's going to continue to have you walking in a direction that doesn't work for your franchise. And that's really what it came down to. I think this was less about Tibbs' performance and or lack of success, or however that you would view it, and more so about them realizing, we need a deep team if we're going to compete. And as long as this guy's the coach, it makes no sense to invest in our bench from a financial standpoint. If we pour $30 million into our bench, this guy's not going to play none of that stuff. And that's not the direction the Knicks want to go in. So I think this firing is about that. That's what I think the firing is about. And the Knicks have it's a reputation of not wanting to answer questions, not wanting to face the media. And being in New York, I can imagine that would not be the easiest thing in the world. It's not like anywhere else. LA and New York is two most difficult places to answer questions. I get that. But if you're going to be there, that got to be part of the criteria from being a part of the organization, is how you handle the viciousness of the media. And I just think that they've been accused of not wanting to answer questions. This is one of the times where Stephen A. is yet again saying that. But for me, if I were in Leon Rose's position, I would have no problem telling people what I was thinking, because this is the answer. This is what it is. At least this is what I would be telling them if that ain't what it is. Like, we want to go in a direction where it just makes more sense for us to utilize our bench. And as long as we have Tom Thibodeau here, we understand that we are in a different philosophy. We're in different spaces with our philosophies. It's easy answer. Easy answer. And that's really what it is. So for me, I just think that the New York Knicks would be wise to just answer the questions that the media wants them to answer, because it's not like they have to sit back and throw Tibbs under the bus or anything. It's widely understood that he only wants to pay about 7 players. You know what I'm saying? And it's widely understood that that's why he's not around. And I mean his team, not necessarily him being fired. They ran out of gas. You overused Karl Anthony Towns. Like, you just knew this was going to happen, and that they overachieved in the playoffs cannot be something that keeps them from making a decision that aligns their coaching staff and their front office with the same philosophy. You see what I'm saying? And that's what I would tell Stephen A. And that's just because we got to the Eastern Conference Finals and won doesn't mean that we prolong the delay of getting on the same page with our coach. We don't want to start another season where we're investing in 7 people, running them into the ground. Okay? Because we may not be as lucky next season with our injury health. And there's some of these things, because of our cap situation and how we've invested, those are mistakes that we can't afford to risk making next season, knowing that the wear and tear of the previous 5 seasons of having Thibodeau is on these guys' legs. Some of them who've been here that long. So it's important that they get some bench players in here, and it's important you have a coach in place who's going to play that bench. And so that's really what it is for the Knicks. I don't think it's that much deeper than that. It's easy to look at it a different way. I know that media loves looking at front offices and saying you're scapegoating. Firing a coach is equal to scapegoating your front office. But the reality is sometimes the coach is what keeps the team from going and taking that next step. So what does it look like to correct that problem? It looks like you fired a coach. That's what it looks like to correct that problem. So you can sit there and say, okay, I want people to answer questions as opposed to correcting a problem, but you're still going to start the season next year with the same problems. That's not your solution. Easing Stephen A's mind is not the solution to the Knicks' problems. The solution to the Knicks' problems is fixing all of those problems. And one of them, for me, in my mind, is getting them a bench and making sure they have a coach in place who's going to run that bench as according to what would otherwise be invested in them. And so that's what I would encourage the New York Knicks to consider. You got to turn some of them dudes that you spent all this money on trying to keep up with Thibodeau into 3 and 4 different people. I don't know who you move. I don't know who you don't move. It's not going to be the easiest decision. These pieces fit. They got as far as they did. You feel great about that. But unless you can find a way to get some kind of flexibility, especially given the fact you've sent all your picks away, you're kind of strangle-held to what you have. And not only is it not good enough, but as I said, it probably ain't going to stay healthy going forward if you keep this up. And if these dudes get hurt, they're on such big, absorbent contracts, and they make up so much of what your roster's about, and your bench is so trash, they'll send you back down into the dark ages, and that's what the Knicks can't afford. So for me, it's like, you got to move somebody, and you got to move them for multiple bodies. That's what it comes down to. Because if I listen to Stephen A. correctly, they only have one tradable pick left. That you would love to be able to trade some of them picks that you traded for OG Anunoby to get yourself the bench you need. You know what I mean? If you some of them picks you gave up for Mikal Bridges, you could trade them without having to give up any bodies. And then you can fill up the fullness of your team. And so that's why you don't trade away picks the way they did. You don't just throw picks in. They had such a plethora of picks. They had gotten so pick rich over the last several years to where they were throwing them in unnecessarily as if they had some time limit on how long they could use them or something. It was just, it lacked imagination, as I said, in the team building. And they don't respect the equity of what picks ultimately represent. And as I'll say, one of the things I wanted to say on this camera today as I was thinking about my own team, my Laker team, is as we continue to go forward in whatever we're doing, let's not neglect to leave ourselves an out. One of the biggest tools, one of the most important tools of team building in the NBA is having the flexibility to undo mistakes, having the flexibility to replace bodies without giving up any. And the only way you're going to do that is if you have the equity that is known as tradable assets. Picks, trade exceptions, mid-level exceptions not utilized in the offseason. These are things that will allow you the flexibility, pick swaps and things like that. They allow you the flexibility of letting those things go instead of bodies when you're in the Knicks situation. And so while they souped up their starting lineup, they didn't leave themselves an out to fix what they got going on right now. So they're going to have to move some of those pieces, diversify in some ways as it pertains to their value that is going to take away from the strength of their starting lineup in order to provide themselves the talent that'll fix their bench. It's not what they want to do. It's lateral. It may be a safer way to solidify you being able to withstand injury, but it doesn't keep you as good as they were this season because you're not going to be able to rely upon such high level talent. So it's the problem that the Knicks have ultimately found themselves with by having no imagination when putting together OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges specifically. Those two pieces, they gave up entirely too much pick equity to acquire those people. And because they weren't retradable at those prices, it was foreseeable in my mind that they weren't going to be able to be retraded for those prices. You were signing up to lose value. And so these are things that are so important. You bring in basketball minds and people who know how to put together rosters. You bring in people that know all the X's and O's of a basketball floor, so they know what pieces you need and this and that. And all of those things are so important. But those individuals need to know what's responsible to do from a cap perspective in order for all of the logic of what ultimately comes together to make you a winner to come together. You need the people who understand the basketball stuff, and you need the people who can respect the things that go into the transaction values and things like that. Things that ultimately make your transactions reasonable for your franchise, so that you're not overpaying, so that you're not foregoing an opportunity to undo mistakes, so that you're not giving away all the future talent tomorrow Like, if you don't have those two things in absolute lockstep and alignment, leaning on one end is going to neglect the other. And your team's not going to be as good as a champion. And so this is a mistake that a lot of teams are still making today. I think some of them are starting to get it. But the teams that ultimately respect those two things ultimately find themselves in positions to be successful. And the teams that don't, if they do get success, it's extremely short-lived. And then the rebuild takes a lot longer because of what they forego in order to put together what they're dreaming of. So that's what I wanted to say, man. Do not neglect to allow yourself an out when you're building your team, man. And so this is what the Knicks did. They went from being one of the most pick wealthy teams in all of basketball, with the capability of making a trade to get any superstar in the world, to a team that's kind of in a bad space as if they mortgage all their picks, for which they did, for stuff that isn't worth half of that, for which it ain't. You know, and these are the type of things that are so egregious when considering, you know, how to assess a team making good decisions or bad decisions. You leaving so much pick equity on the table, or you not getting the most value for everything that you have, letting superstars walk and retire in your uniform, these things all lead to whether or not you have enough to do enough, man. And this is why I think that the sensitivity of this type of thing needs to be expressed more in a lot of these conversations about team building in this environment, NBA environment. Now, if we're talking about somewhere else where this isn't the landscape, it don't, you know, it's not no picks and no trade exceptions and salary caps and all that, then it's an entirely different thing. We could just focus on putting the right pieces together for your basketball court and all the different things you want to run and all the different visual stuff that has to do with the sport of basketball and the science of basketball. But the science of basketball is not what puts your team logic together. Your team logic can be forgoed in a massive way while trying to make sure you have all the dudes that can do the pick and roll and the most intricate defenses and all this different stuff. You will mess your roster up trying to put all that stuff together without considering the logic that has to do with transaction logic, you know, things that have to do with transactional boundaries and things that you must not do in order to keep your team from being horrible. And so many owners and so many GMs ignore these things or don't understand these things, and they end up ruining their franchises. You know what I'm saying? That's what it is. They end up giving all that stuff away to teams like Oklahoma damn City, and you see what the hell they put together. So that's what happened there, man. This is what the NBA is made of right now. That's why the Oklahoma City Thunder are so damn souped up. It's because they were doing things the smart way in the transactional logic category, while everybody else was trying to build something that you were going to watch on ABC for a couple years without thinking about how all of that was ultimately going to ruin everything else for the next 15 years after that. So the Knicks are just yet another tale of what happens when you don't respect pick equity. When you don't respect pick wealth. You have all the picks in the world, you want to throw it at two guys. Not even two stars, just two guys, man. Two nice starters. I mean, that's just such, you are overpaying, man. What the New York Knicks ultimately did is they paid a Ferrari price for a Jaguar. A Jaguar is a nice car. Very nice car. Luxury car, more affordable than what the average person can afford. But when you start talking about the difference between that and a Ferrari, you understand how messed up that situation is. That's what they did. They took $300,000 and bought themselves a Jag or a Mercedes. Like, bro, no. Absolutely not. You don't do that. And so that's what the Knicks have done. And I don't know how you undo it. Some of that value is just going to be lost. Some of that value is just lost. You know what I'm saying? And now they got to try to take Mikal Bridges maybe, or Karl Anthony Towns, and trade him for a bunch of stuff and hope that they can reset that process somehow. Maybe they luck up and get a young player that's getting ready to turn into something. Maybe they luck up and get a first round pick from a bad GM who's about to make that mistake on his end. But these are the type of things that you have to luck up and have happen in order for the New York Knicks to find themselves in a position from which to really build a champion, in my opinion. Because right now, they don't have that. They don't have that. So much of what they have is lost value in their uniform. To now, they're kind of capped off at just perennial playoff team, which is not where they're trying to go. They're a perennial playoff team. They will get to the playoffs every year, but that's about as far as this unit's going to take them. And if they start plucking stuff off this unit, start trading it for what it's actually worth, they're going to find that their team's not much better than that any damn way. That's going to be the problem. And so for me, I don't know what I do, but, I tell you, I'm looking for deals. I'm looking for deals. I'm looking for anything that can ultimately be turned into something else that's worth a little more potentially. Swinging for the fences with every opportunity I have. And I'm not necessarily looking to undo all of what it is the Knicks have, but I'm going to for sure turn one of them dudes into three dudes. That's happening. I don't know if it's Carl. I don't know if it's Mikhail. I don't know if it's OG. It's not all three, but one of those people I'm going to trade for three people. And that gives me some depth. Hopefully maybe one of those three people can turn into something just as good as the dude I'm trading away. And then we can really be in the money as it pertains to value. But other than that, all I'm really trying to ultimately do if I'm the Knicks is buy myself a bit more security in the injury potential department, if that makes any sense. So that if that value of that one player, OG Anunoby, if he breaks his ankle or something like that and is out for 2 years, it hurts significantly more than if I trade him for three people. You see what I'm saying? And then, now we got 3 chances of somebody going down the year for 2 years instead of one. That's the kind of thing the Knicks need, man. It's just a little more injury support on their bench, a little more talent on their bench, but it will be taken away from that starting lineup. So, yeah, man, the Knicks situation, I mean, it's not the worst situation in the world because they really do have a talented bench. Like, they have a talented team in a weak Eastern Conference. But from year to year to year, they should probably, in theory, come short. They should come up short. Get to the playoffs, out second round. That's kind of who they're going to be. That's what this team, in my opinion, is capped off at. And I believe it's because of the OG Anunoby trade, where they gave away 3 picks for OG Anunoby. If they would have held on them 3 picks and have a bit more of a vision for how to utilize what all of that is worth, they would have had enough. That's what I think. They would have had enough. So, it is what it is, man. That's what they got to deal with now. I think the New York Knicks are going to have a nice team. I think they're going to win 50 games a year. But they're going to run into Boston and get knocked off. They're going to run into Cleveland and get knocked off. They're going to run into Indy and get knocked off. And whatever the new teams are going to be, Detroit, Orlando, somebody else that emerges out of nowhere like Charlotte or Washington, they're going to get knocked off. That's what I see coming. So, I think firing Thibodeau was the only thing they could do at this point. And then we'll see what else they do throughout the rest of the offseason. So, I don't think they're in the running for Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't think they could do that. If they would have kept their picks, they definitely would be front runners. And that's what I knew then. Giving away 8 picks for Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, what the hell am I doing that? These 8 picks will get me Giannis 2 years from now. But nobody really wants to think like that. Everybody wants to do something right now. We got to do it right now. And that's what I kept on telling y'all on this channel 3 years ago, 2 summers ago. Yo, stop thinking so in the short term because the market's going to open up. Guys are going to move around. And when they do, you're a team like the Knicks, you're a team like the Heat, you're a team like the Lakers. You got the spot they want to come to. They don't want to go to Indy. They don't want to go to Minnesota. They want to go to LA, New York, Miami. And so if you're one of those teams, all you have to do is keep your house clean. It's what I've been preaching for 3-4 years now. Keep your house clean. The market itself is going to attract the talent. You just got to make sure you have a good situation for them to come to. And what does that look like? Pick wealth, young players, rim protection, facilitators, things that make a superstar feel good about being on the damn team. That is what these idiot front offices need to come around to get through their thick skulls. Otherwise, we're going to be watching Indiana versus Cleveland versus OKC and all of that, because these are the teams that didn't make those mistakes. While the big market teams are going to be marching around in the muck, trying to put together super teams from free agency without any bench and going home in the first round. So that's pretty much what I see there, man. I've been talking about this for years. If y'all been following me, you already heard all of this 10 times over, man. I'm a fan of the biggest market, the Lakers. There's no bigger market. And I've watched us make this mistake. And I keep on telling our front office, just keep the house clean, man. You don't need to do all that. You don't need to do none of this stuff y'all doing, chasing superstars, acquiescing to all different types of weird politics so that superstars will feel comfortable. All of that is not as important as you just keeping a lot of picks and it's just a healthy books. And the superstars will just come, they'll come to you. I say the same thing to the Knicks. BDL 44. I thank y'all for watching.